The United States helped a Cuban spy who was incarcerated here for 16 years by getting his wife back in Cuba pregnant through artificial insemination.
Somebody's getting pregnant tonight.
So she's about to have a baby in 2 weeks. It's amazing. The Cuban spy that's been detained here for 16 years and now is free in Cuba is Gerardo Hernandez. And his wife, Adriana Perez, appeared to be pregnant when they were reunited, and people were like, what's going on? Why is she pregnant? Well, it turns out that when Cuba and the United States started negotiating over lifting the embargo, or at least freeing Alan Gross, they agreed that they would help Adriana Perez get pregnant through artificial insemination. They didn't have any conjugal visits for 16 years. That is insane.
Now, of course, it's perfectly normal because he's a spy and he got caught here. We're not going to let it. Oh, yes, you spying against us? Bring your wife over and have at it, Hoss. Go to town on it.
He had 2 life sentences for spying. That's amazing.
So now let's break this down. First of all, of course, the right-wing heads will explode. Obama's helping Cuban spies impregnate their wife, the Antichrist. Okay. All right. So first of all, we spy on each other all the time. We spy on the Cubans. They spy on us.
We spy on each other.
Yeah, we spy on ourselves, right? So now he's hailed as a hero in Cuba because he was spying on guys who were anti-Castro guys, who we view as the good guys in America, who had been doing bombings at Cuban hotels.
Killing innocent Cubans. Because they were really concerned about how the Castros were treating the Cuban people. So they were bombing hotels, obviously.
They had to destroy the village in order to liberate it. Like as the famous saying goes from Vietnam, they had to bomb the hotel in order to liberate it. So look, it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? And so fighting against Castro is a good thing, bombing hotels is a bad thing, and all countries have spies. So we caught the guy, but he's on their team, he's not on our team. We're not going to let him go. Of course, we're going to give him 2 life sentences, right? Now, the reason that they do this thing where they allow him to artificially inseminate his wife is because we wanted the Cubans to treat Alan Gross well.
Right.
And we wanted to set up a good relationship so we can get Alan Gross out. He's our guy. And by the way, he was violating Cuban law just like their spies were here. And so what he was doing was trying to circumvent the censorship by setting up internet so people could get information. Now, I think that's terrific, and I love Alan Gross for doing that. But they would, of course, say that he was breaking their law and defying their regime, and that's why they imprisoned him, right?
Exactly.
And here's who you have to make a deal with: your enemies. It would be easy if your friend imprisoned somebody. You'd go up to them and be like, "Hey, buddy, you want to let him out?" And they'd be like, "Sure, why not?" Right? But that's not how it works.
Yeah.
We were against one another. We had prisoners. We swapped them.
I'm really interested to see how everything kind of pans out, though, because if they do successfully lift the embargo and then American tourism is allowed in Cuba, and then there's more of a free flow of information, both to and from Cuba, I think that a lot of things that have been portrayed about Cuba and the United States are going to be proven wrong. I feel like there's a lot of anti-Cuba propaganda here in the United States due to conservatives. They make it seem as though because of the Castro regime, people in Cuba have been so oppressed that they don't have anyone who is even skilled or anyone who has the ability to become someone. Cuba just sent 300 medical care workers to West Africa in order to deal with the Ebola situation, right? When it was, the big news story. I remember that was one of the articles that I had read about. Oh, really? Cuba has 300 doctors to spare to go fight Ebola in West Africa? It's not as impoverished and terrible as the United States makes it seem.
So I'm sure there's misconceptions on both sides. I'm positive that they view the U.S. in a light that's not exactly accurate either. Now, having said that, and by the way, Cuba did do things in the past that were really problematic. In the past, they would send soldiers to Africa, and that would make a lot of the conflicts worse. By the way, so did we. Okay, let's just keep it real on both fronts, right?
Well, when we do it, it's okay.
Yeah, okay, because we were there, we were sent there as liberators, so it's okay. And by the way, the communists also thought they were liberators, right? So now, though, they have great doctors. Everybody knows that, right? No, that's the problem. Nobody knows that here in the U.S. But outside of the U.S., people know that they have great doctors in Cuba. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not impoverished in other ways. They could use some new cars, and it could use a new paint job, as everybody acknowledges when you go to Cuba, right? Yeah. For all their buildings. But they do have a good education system, they do have good doctors, and these are the things that we can benefit from if we were to trade, if we were to visit one another, if we were to know more about each other. And in the end, that's more advantageous to the U.S. and eventually the Cuban citizens anyway, because it's not like the Cuban government is going to convince the Americans to become communists.
Right.
But it's fairly likely that through trade and information, eventually the Cuban government will become more and more democratic.
Yeah, you don't change a political system by isolating a country, right?
Yeah, just look at North Korea.
Yeah, you also don't change a political system by bombing it, but you can change a political system through education and information. So I think that's probably the best part about all of this.
Absolutely. And they did what they had to do to take care of Alan Gross. They did a prisoner swap. Not a lot of people are talking about the 53 other prisoners that Cuba released, right? They're just talking about it as if it's Alan Gross for 5 Cubans. No, we got another spy on our side out and 53 other prisoners. So I fully support whatever actions they took to make that deal happen.